With week 10 now behind us, week 11 is now here, and it is showtime.
All right, on the count of three, it's showtime. Ready? One,
Nope, not doing that. I've been on Showtime mode since breakfast.
Okay,
Have you not?
all right, just forget it then.
Showtime!
It's showtime. Oh, never mind. Let's go.
Okay, maybe not like that, but the point is, in this video, we are going to be going over players that you need to be adding to your fantasy rosters, which can make all the difference in the world as we get ready to prepare your team for a fantasy football playoff push. Now, the first one I'm going to encourage you to actually add is going to be tight end Cade Otton from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's currently rostered in 34.7% of ESPN leagues. He's coming off a very solid game where he had 9 receptions on 12 targets for 82 yards, and since the beginning of the year he has been so effective as far as being available for this offense. And what I mean by that is that I want to show you his snap counts. You're seeing here right now he played 97% of the snaps, which by far led all of the Tampa Bay pass catchers. But when you just see even what it's been like since the beginning of the year, he's clearly been out on the field for Baker Mayfield. But we've seen now that as of late that opportunity has now turned into volume because of the injuries that we've seen within this Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver room. And we're seeing right here, since week 5, he's averaged 6 targets per game, and he is going to be primed to continue to see this kind of work, considering that Mike Evans is still out, Chris Godwin, and of course the only wide receiver that is getting a lot of attention is going to be Emeka Egbuka. However, I will say week 11 does present a very tough matchup because the Buccaneers are going up against the Buffalo Bills, who actually allow the fewest points to opposing tight ends. And maybe you are a player that just suffered Tucker Kraft being out for the whole season. However, I think Cade Otton could be still valuable because in week 12 we see the matchup open up a little bit more going up against the Los Angeles Rams, so the matchup could be tough in week 11. I still believe that the target and the volume alone gives him a solid floor, but I would still be very happy with him being on your bench if you have another better option, so that way you can put all your focus on week 12 when the Buccaneers face the Los Angeles Rams in their week 12 matchup. The running back room is so shallow, and it typically is for most leagues in most formats, but I'm going to give you 2 to focus on here. The first one is going to be Demercado, running back out of the Arizona Cardinals. I know a handful of weeks ago I was telling you to get Bam Knight, and it seemed like it was a musical chairs kind of thing within that Arizona Cardinals offense, because you saw Michael Carter getting touches, and then it was Bam Knight, and now you're seeing Demercado. And when we look at where he's currently rostered at, he's only rostered in 18.5% of ESPN leagues. He had 4 carries for 64 yards, really was effective in the passing game, getting 3 receptions on 40 yards, ended as the running back 18. And again, like I've said, we've seen Bam Knight essentially being phased out of this offense. However, we also know that Trey Benson is just around the corner as far as being back and available for this Arizona Cardinals offense. So because of the topsy-turvy that we're seeing lately with Arizona, Demercado could be someone that you could play, especially if you are in a pinch as far as where you're at with the running back position. But of course, if Trey Benson is to come into the mix, I expect that the Cardinals are going to slowly weave him in, and especially with Kyler Murray out for a handful of weeks, it's going to be interesting to see what this Arizona Cardinals offense will look like with Jacoby Brissett under center. Now, another running back I want you to focus on is going to be Brian Robinson Jr. out of the San Francisco 49ers. Now, currently he's rostered in 21.1% of ESPN leagues. He came off a game where he saw 8 carries, 41 yards, had 1 touchdown, and even the week prior was very effective. In week 9, he had 5 carries for 53 yards as well as a touchdown, and he's been very efficient the last couple weeks. Last week he saw a yards per carry at 10.6, and in this past game we saw him have 5.1 yards per carry. And there's no doubt that this running back room belongs strictly to Christian McCaffrey. The only reason why I'm adding him here on this list is number 1, of course, the availability, and we're seeing now more of a workload that is increasing slowly. And if God forbid anything were to happen to Christian McCaffrey, I believe that Brian Robinson Jr. is showing the familiarity grown within this offense, and I believe that he can be someone that could be a fantastic handcuff for CMC, especially if anything were to happen to him because of injury. Hey, we have a few more players to go over, but before we do so, most of you that watch these videos aren't already subscribed, so do me a solid. If you are getting value you in these videos. Hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. Let's go over these last few players. And this next player is going to be wide receiver Darius Slayton out of the New York Giants. Slayton is currently rostered in 33.8% of ESPN leagues. He also saw 4 receptions on 4 targets for 89 yards, and it felt like all game long was just putting up highlight reel after highlight reel. And since coming back in week 8, you can see here his targets have been really steady. He saw 5 3 weeks ago, then he had 7 last week, and then we also see 4 targets this past game. And clearly, since the Malik Neighbors injury, Wando Robinson has led all wide receivers in New York with a 99% snap count last week. But we see here that among the wide receivers that are right behind him, it's been consistently Darius Slayton. And we see here that also the week 11 matchup coming up is going to be very tough because the New York Giants are going up against the Green Bay Packers. And with the Jackson Dart injury with the concussion a little bit up in the air, it's more than likely that we'll see a Russell Wilson New York Giants offense. However, with Brian Daboll just being fired, that may be the shot in the arm that the Giants may see in week 11 to get things turned around, considering that they are going up against this tougher matchup. So maybe a trap game for Green Bay Packers fans who just came off a very tough loss to my beloved Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football in week 10. This next player that I'm going to encourage you to add is going to be wide receiver Tez Johnson out of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he's currently rostered in 27.9% of ESPN leagues. We saw him have 4 receptions, 5 targets, 42 yards, 2 touchdowns. He's been averaging 6.5 targets per game since week 7. And since week 5, we've also been averaging a very solid 49 yards per game. Very good for a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex spot for the most part. And I did say that the Buccaneers are going to be facing a tough matchup versus the Buffalo Bills, and though they are more stingy versus the opposing tight ends, things could open up a little bit more with wide receivers. And with a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, I believe that Tez Johnson at least secures a really solid floor, considering that he has been getting some good looks over the past few weeks. Now, I'm going to go over 2 players really quick because I've already gone over them in the past, but this first one's going to be Alec Pierce from the Indianapolis Colts. Had a very strong game. We're seeing the target shares consistently being strong for him. He had 4 receptions on 7 targets, 84 yards, had 1 touchdown. He continues to see really efficient productivity for this offense. He continues his hot streak. He actually owned the snap percentage among all wide receivers for now the 3rd straight week. One fantasy tip that I've been leveraging really for a while now is for players that are going into a bye, see if you really don't need them, go ahead and wait to see if they clear waivers the next day, so that way it's just a simple quick add through free agency, so that way you are prioritizing the waiver wire ads that can help make a difference within your fantasy rosters. And this other rapid fire player is someone that I mentioned 2 weeks ago. It's going to be tight end Juwan Johnson out of the New Orleans Saints. Currently, he's only rostered in 35.2% of ESPN leagues. And guys, the tight end position is very shallow, and Juwan Johnson has seen some very steady volume. I know the Saints are coming off a pretty big win last week. And again, when you look at these game logs for Juwan Johnson, 2nd straight game with at least 4 targets. He had 4 receptions, 4 targets, 92 yards, had a touchdown. Same thing last week. He saw 3 receptions, 31 yards, 4 targets, 1 touchdown. And again, the week prior, we saw 8 targets. The week prior to that, 7. So we're seeing at least a very steady target share within this offense. And I know that the New Orleans Saints don't really present an offense that gets you all excited, but even with how shallow tight ends could be, Juwan Johnson is showing that he can be a very solid floor add to your fantasy rosters as well. Okay, now this one may be my most intriguing recommendation, but it's going to be Joe Burrow. I know he's not a priority. He's rostered in 62.5% of ESPN leagues, so he's more than likely not available, but just scan your waiver wire, see if he's available. And I know that Joe Burrow cleared his designation so he could actually play, but talks are that he may not even come back until the week 12 matchup versus the Ravens. And the point of this is that the Bengals are going to be, throughout the next 3 weeks, going to be facing 2 of their divisional opponents, which means that they could very much still be in it, which could actually really incentivize the Bengals to bring Joe Burrow back. And if that is to be the case, you can have an elite quarterback on your roster really basically for cheap, especially if he's still available. So go ahead and just scan your waivers and see if he's available, and if he is available, go ahead and stash him in your IR slot if you don't have one. And if you don't have an IR slot, consider changing commissioners, because you need to make sure that they have an IR slot in your fantasy settings for your roster construction. Hey, thank you so much for making it to the very end of the video. Listen, if you are getting value in these videos, hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. Best of luck to you as you look to bolster up your rosters to the waiver wire. In the meantime, take care. God bless. Peace.